This is the new TC Pride Podcast, episode 64, part 1 with TifDynamite and Jack Fatale of Wicked Wenches Cabaret. Happy Pride 2017. We are on location in Northeast Minneapolis at Minsky Theater, and I'm here with
TifDynamite
and Jack Fatale.
And we're here to talk about a show that you have coming up next weekend. It's a special one weekend only show. So Tiff, we've actually talked before on an episode that we did about Project Q, Sarah McPeck's film that she released. And you said you do several kinds of art forms. Can you kind of talk about like the various art forms that you participate in?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've done all sorts of stuff over time. I sort of pick one thing and stick with it. I've done a little bit of theater work, but not too much. And I was a dancer for a while. I've emceed a bunch of different places. I did the 90s for a touch, and mostly emceeing drag shows. I've emceed burlesque shows, things of that nature. So that's kind of my mainstay. And then I switched for a while, and I started doing burlesque because I thought that was pretty cool, and that's sort of where the go-go dancing was leading. And then after I got kind of tired of burlesque, traditional burlesque is cool, but it's not really my thing. So I did it for a little bit, and then I switched to improv. And I started doing improv for about 6 years, and that was really fun. And then after improv, I wanted something new, so I decided to try aerial arts. And that is where I met Jack Fatale at her studio that she owns, Expertise Fitness. And I started doing aerial arts there. And then I joined the Wicked Wenches from there.
And Jack, we actually just met right now. So if people don't know anything about your background, can you share a little bit about you? I understand you've been involved in theater and burlesque and various arts for a long time as well.
I've been performing since I was 3 years old, so I've racked up about 26 years on stage. And I also have my degree from the U of M, in theater. And I've been performing my entire life. I started doing burlesque about 10 years ago, and then I started teaching about 7 years ago. It's kind of a funny story. I'd been teaching children prior to that, commercial acting and theater. And then once I started doing burlesque myself, I thought, oh man, well, I know how to throw together a curriculum. I wonder if there's other people that would be interested in this really empowering art form. And, I was getting over a lot of body issues that I had myself, and burlesque really helped with that. And it turns out there's hundreds of women and men and people of all genders that are really interested in that particular art form. So we started Expertise Fitness, and it just exploded. And I started doing the pole dancing as well. And then from Expertise Fitness, the students, we all wanted to keep doing it, and we wanted to keep going. And that's where the Wicked Wenches idea came up. So.
And for people who aren't familiar with aerial arts, what can you tell people about that? I know Tiff demonstrated some in the Project Q film. What can you kind of tell people about that?
Sure. Aerial arts is in reference to a specific part of circus performance. Circus performance would be the really large umbrella. Aerial arts specifically is anything that is aerial, up in the air. So you're talking about lyra, also known as aerial hoop, or silks, known as tissue, rope, any of that kind of stuff. A lot of Cirque du Soleil kind of a feel to it. And not only is it a really great entertainment piece, but it's an amazing workout when you're working on learning how to do it. And joining that family has really become pole dance as well. Pole dance has really taken off as not only a sport, but something that we have a confederacy, we have the national pole dancing sports organization, all kind of things like that. And there's tons and tons of competitions around.
So the name of the group that you're performing with in these shows right now is Wicked Wenches Cabaret. And I understand that they incorporate a lot of different kinds of theater, like aerial and vaudeville and burlesque and that kind of thing too. For people that aren't familiar with Wicked Wenches Cabaret, can you kind of tell folks a little bit about it?
So the Wicked Wenches Cabaret was founded in 2011. And like I said, it was a lot of students that came out of Expertise Fitness. So we had all these vaudeville sort of trainings and skills. And I've loved vaudeville ever since I was a young kid. I mean, I watched Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and I loved watching any of the old musicals, Judy Garland and all them. And so I loved this concept of not just performance, but performance that had to do with the vaudevillian era. And so we were like, hey, let's put together this troupe, and it seemed like a lot of fun. And we picked a name, and we just started doing shows. We started off, we did a couple of shows at Ground Zero. We did a bunch of shows at Insert Coins, which is a club that used to exist downtown. It has since changed into another, I believe it's the Venue now. And we started doing our shows at Insert Coins, and it took off pretty quickly. We started off with just doing a variety show, but then, of course, me having my theater background, I wanted a script and I wanted a story. And ironically, this is the Under the Rainbow, which is what we're doing this next weekend, was the very first scripted show that we did. And so it's a really big full circle that now for our first Pride show here in the Minsky, we are doing the very first show that we did ever as a troupe.
And Tiff, you said you actually like prefer improv and that kind of thing, right? So yeah, I'm sure that it's a scripted show, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff that's made up as you go along too, right?
Oh yeah, I mean Jack is actually pretty good at improv too, as is Kit Vicious, who may or may not come to interview with us today. So we write the script and everything, but then as we go through the process of practicing, sometimes things come up that we think are funnier, and so we'll change them. Which is sort of how you write a show from improv. But we'll do those things, or some of these things will happen on stage, and it happens to Jack and I all the time, or something gets messed up, and we just run with it, and we just do funny things, and people seem to enjoy it, and then we incorporate it into the show.
Happens on the podcast all the time, actually.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, so our first show was Under the Rainbow, and then after that we did Super Mario Brothers, which was fun. We did a Super Mario Brothers burlesque show, which was really fun. And then from there, we stopped playing at that venue. We worked at another venue for a while, and then we got this venue, which is great. But we've done so many different shows as we've gone along. A lot of them are sort of nerd based, because that's kind of the thing that we like.
So I was checking out Minsky Theater online, and I was checking out the Facebook page, and y'all have done a crap ton of shows. There's like 100, like there's tons and tons of pictures, like pretty much every holiday and like almost like every weekend you guys are doing something. Did you want to tell folks a little bit about some of the shows that you've done before you kind of talk about the one that you're doing?
Sure, yeah. So the Wicked Wenches specifically, we did Under the Rainbow, which we're doing again, and then we'd done Super Mario Brothers, which is really fun. So we basically took the idea of the video game Super Mario Brothers, and then we added an element of The Godfather to it. So that King Koopa is the Godfather, and then it's so ridiculous. And they have to go on a mission, of course, like you do in Mario Brothers, and save the princesses and the whole thing. Anyway, it's very silly. So we had a great time. Did you want to expand on that?
Yeah, sure. So the Wicked Wenches in general, our entire shtick is parody. So we take a lot of pop culture references and we mash them up with other pop culture references. And a lot of people, it's funny because doing derivative work is not as easy as people think it is. I mean, yes, you have a base foundation to go off of, but for both legal and creative reasons, you have to make your derivative work quite different from the original inspirational works, and because we're mixing in parody as well. So like she was explaining with Super Mario Brothers, we took basically the very familiar pattern of and characters of Mario Brothers, but then we overlaid a lot of The Godfather. But really, the show we ended up with isn't The Godfather either. So it's Mario. Mario is set in the 1920s, and King Koopa is giving us an offer we can't refuse because he's got the princesses locked up, and we got to go find him. Yeah. So and and then of course we're always layering in jokes, but then the final layer that we're sprinkling like our magical sprinkles on top is always an empowerment or self-discovery message.
There's that. And so what we do, I've kind of explained it to the audience this way in case they've never seen a show like this before, is we do it sort of like a musical. So as you and I had talked about vauxhalls before, yeah. So we do it like a musical. So basically, at the place in the musical where you would stop and sing a song, instead of doing that, we do burlesque, or we do aerial arts, or we blow fire, or something like that instead, into music instead. And that's how we sort of incorporate that in there, and becomes a vaudeville instead.
And so this Under the Rainbow show sounds like it's backed by popular demand. You've done it before, right?
Yeah, this will be the seventh time.
Very popular demand, I guess.
Well, we actually performed this at Pride a couple of years ago, and it was great fun. It was huge. We drew a big crowd for that year. Hey, Pride, we'd love to come back anytime you want to bring us. But yeah, it's basically our parody of The Wizard of Oz, and part of the essential piece to what we do as well, because there is the adult theming, is we have to kick up the age of everybody. So we have to write that into the story and incorporate that as part of the story as well. But yeah, it's basically it's the Wizard of Oz format, and then we just overlay all of our aesthetic.
Yeah, last year we did, it was Peter Pan was last spring, is that correct? Yeah. So we did Pan's Peter last spring. Ha ha ha. The names are always way more dirty than the actual show is, but we just think of these ridiculous names and run with it. We did Pan's Peter last year, and that was really fun. It was set in the 80s, so Wendy got pulled by Peter Pan back into Never Have I Ever Land, where it was the 80s perpetually all the time, which was great. And I got to play Captain Hook, or the pirate captain formerly known as Hook. So as a prince-based character, yeah. So we got to play these really fun characters based on sort of 80s tropes, and it was really, really fun. And we, like Wendy goes to pull out her cell phone, and it's a giant block phone, that kind of thing. Very silly stuff. After that, we did a more serious one. It was actually our first Shakespeare one we did. We did Romeo and Juliet, a Breast Side Story, which was really fun. So we set it in the 60s, which was really cool. Jack wrote it. It was great. So we set it in the 60s, and everything was very serious. And Jack got to fulfill her dream of playing Juliet, and it was very over-dramatic. And I got to be Mercutio, which is great. I had a big red afro and, did a lot of drugs. Very silly. But that was a really fun show to do. It was very very theater-oriented, so a lot of people who like Shakespeare really enjoyed the show. And a lot of people were like, there's so much Shakespeare. But it was really fun. We used a lot of the Shakespeare lingo. And then following that, we skipped the summer, and in the fall we did The Vampirette, which is a show we've done before. It's like The Bachelorette, but with vampires. So Bella loses her love and Edward, who gets murdered, and then she has to find a new vampire. So she has a bunch of vampires to choose from. She has a Lestat, or she has Count Von Count, and and a bunch of vampire blades. She has a bunch of vampires to choose from, and on the side, Buffy has a whole plan where she's going to murder all these vampires with Blade's help, and so it's a whole thing. Dracula's the host of the show. It's ridiculous. Yeah, so we did that, and then everybody liked that. And the following that, speaking of the grown-up thing, so we did Grinch. So we did the Grinch that stole Triple Xmas. The thing with that is that Cindy is a child, and the Grinch is like in his 60s, apparently, according to the book. So we were like, we have to make them both adults to make this a good story. So we made it into a rom-com, a 90s rom-com. And so I got to play the Grinch, and we had Cindy Lou, but she was grown up and she was home from college, and the Grinch happened to be her age, and they both happened to be like 28, and we had them sort of fall in love. It was very 90s rom-com where, girl meets boy, girl loses boy, girl gets boy back at the end, that kind of thing. So that was really fun. And then we did a classic one we've done a couple times before people love is Clue. You remember that movie from the late 80s? Yeah, the Clue. So we did Clue, which is great, very fast-paced and fun, and it was very sort of classically based on the movie, which was great.
Well, we also not only was it based on the movie, but we actually, because we needed more characters, we actually went to the board game, and I did 5 hours of research into every expansion character that's ever been created for Cluedo, and we
That's commitment to your art right there.
Yeah, no, that's probably about normal for Tiff and I to do about 5 or 6 hours of research on. Yeah.
Researching of our characters are ridiculous. I didn't play Super Mario Bros. When I was a kid. That was my sister's game. I was more of a Tetris person because OCD. And she, so I asked my sister a bunch about Mario, and I was like, "Tell me about these characters, this King Koopa character." She was like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah, and then I looked up online and just sort of researched the King Koopa character, which sounds silly, but you kind of have to do that to make it good. The very last show that we did was A Midsummer Night's Wet Dream. Which was really fun, and so we got to really costume it up with a lot of characters. And I was Oberon, so she did my makeup. Jack does a lot of good theater makeup, so she did my makeup like a deer, and I had the horns and everything. We did a whole just really lush, fun costumes for everybody. It was really, really cool and very bright and vibrant and poppy.
There are pictures on the Facebook page, right? I think I saw some, right?
There sure are. Yeah. On the Wicked Wenches Cabaret Facebook page. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of pictures of that, and that was great. Yeah, you were Titania, and that was beautiful. Yeah, so everyone did a great job with that role. Everyone was a little afraid after the last show. All the cast was a little afraid after the last show with Romeo and Juliet, where we made them do a lot of Shakespearean language. And this one we sort of camped it up a little bit. We went for a Sam Raimi kind of feel to it, so we made it really campy and kind of silly. And I don't know where he got this idea, but she built a rock. She and the tech director built a rock with a fan in it. So when we would give soliloquies, we'd stand up on the rock and it would just blow our hair.
For dramatic effect, right?
Oh yeah, and it even had an uplight. It was pretty amazing.
It was everybody's favorite gag was that the whole audience would just die every time it happens. Your hair would be in your eyes. But yeah, so we like to make it really fun. I mean, our mainstay, both of us, is comedy, so we want to make sure that all the shows that we do are really funny. The only one taking away from that was when we did Romeo and Juliet, which it was funny, but it wasn't as funny.
Yeah, I mean, Romeo and Juliet was funny too. It was a little darker, but the moment when I have my meltdown when I'm talking about where Romeo is, I threw myself on the stairs, down the stairs, back up the stairs. I ended up upside down on the stairs at one point while I'm doing this epic speech about my lost love. And I mean, we made Juliet and Romeo just the most whiny teenagers that you possibly could. I think at one point we did toss in the line like, "You just don't understand me, Lord Capulet." It was pretty great. So
yeah, it was very interesting. That particular show was very interesting because there was a lot of darkness to it, like you said, because Mercutio gets killed in the play. So I got killed, so I had to like really act like I was dead, and it was like a whole thing. It was a very somber moment after when we had Petra Payne was our singer for the show, and so she was the chorus, so she sung all the intro to everything. So it was really cool, but it was interesting to bring that moment to the audience who's used to seeing a very upbeat burlesque show, and all of a sudden and someone's dead.
Sounds epic. So you've both been involved in cabaret burlesque for a long time. I wanted to ask each of you just to kind of talk about burlesque in general and like what it is about it that's kept you so motivated for so long to be so involved.
Good question. So, like I said, I started doing burlesque back in around 2000, and I didn't know what it was called at the time. I just called it striptease because I didn't know. And so I had the girls' makeup routines at Club Metro at the girly show we did, where I was like, okay, make up a routine where you take your clothes off. It'll be fun to a song. I was like, I've seen this before in the movie, But so I liked it, and it was really fun for a while. And then because of my age, I sort of grew out of this feeling like I wanted to be sexy all the time, and I didn't realize that it could be fun too. I realized I could make it a funny thing as well. So I sort of grew out of it and decided that I wasn't interested in doing it any longer. And then I moved on to improv and other things, like I said. But then I came back to it when Jack invited me to join the troupe.
Well, for me, it's kind of a serious note, but this is the story I tell everybody about why we started. So when I was 19 years old, I was sexually assaulted, and that definitely made me feel very disconnected from my body and very sort of in this space where I didn't feel beautiful. I didn't feel in control anymore of my own body, and I didn't like that. I didn't like feeling kind of disembodied from, this thing that I inhabit. And so I was looking for a way to try to recapture my own personal power and then also just feel reconnected with my body and not so at war with it. And so I started doing pole dancing, and that was really physical and fun, and it was a great exercise, but it also made me start to feel sexy again and like connected with my body. And you really get to know your body when you're doing pole dancing because you don't want to die. So you get to know everything about, what your arms can do, what your legs can do, and things like that. Well, you take that and then you add in my theater training, and it's a hop, skip, and a jump to burlesque. And I think I saw Dita Von Teese on YouTube one day and was like, ah, and like the light bulb went off over the head, very cartoon like, and I just thought, oh man, this is the way to go. And I actually, Le Cirque Rouge, I actually did a Le Cirque Rouge show, and I did it one time and I was hooked. And I was like, oh, this is cool, because there's something incredibly deeply empowering about being vulnerable on stage, not only emotionally, but physically. You're physically vulnerable when you do a striptease because you are exposing parts of yourself that, especially for those of us that identify as female, is something you're not supposed to do. It really rails against this sort of, the mother and whore dichotomy that you're either supposed to be pure and untouchable, or you're supposed to be available to everybody at all times. And so it really rails against all that because you're deciding who, what, when, where, how, and to what music. And so it's a very, very empowering experience for me. For me, it's performative consent is really what it comes down to. And I was like, hey, this is really neat. I think I should teach this to other people. And it turns out lots of people like performative consent. And then, of course, you layer on top of that any sort of the comedy because, sexuality is kind of silly when you really break it down and start to think about it in general. It's this very fun game we play with each other. And there's all these different types of rules that all different people, we constantly are disagreeing and then re-agreeing on what the rules are around it. And it's a lot of fun. So that's the reason.
The TC Pride Podcast is a production of Podletter Media and Twin Cities Pride. Subscribe now on iTunes, on Android, or on YouTube at tcpridepodcast.org.